Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 60-second part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 62, Big Trouble Little Island Part 2. Achiko grunted as she punched another villain in the chest, sending the man flying. She really loved this exoskeleton Melissa had made. Not as much as she loved Izumi or the other members of the Snuggle Squad. But it was up there. She was taking out villains and security robots in like 1 or 2 punches. It was awesome. Okay, so the big gorilla-like villain from earlier had gotten up. Apparently, he was only stunned and was now causing her issues, but with the only other things to deal with being some guy who could display shit and a few security robots, dealing with him wasn't so difficult. Kleiner doing what she did best and smothering everything beneath a lot of wolves, and Durandal running around cutting up robots with a chainsaw on his tail. Fun. She ducked underneath another punch from the gorilla villain and jabbed him in the chest, sending him flying into a pillar. He finally didn't get up. Achiko let out a sigh of relief. That bastard took a lot of effort to take down. So much so that she doubted she would have been able to do it without the exoskeleton. Kleiner suddenly shouted something, but due to not understanding German, she didn't know what was said. She couldn't even check the girl's mind due to that bloody thumping sound she had been hearing ever since this shit started. Seriously, what the fuck was that shit? Luckily for her, she had a gut feeling that the German girl was warning her about something, so she ducked, just in time too, as she felt something brush against her back. Which was not a good feeling, as that meant something had gotten through the exoskeleton she was wearing. Fuck you! Durandal shouted, followed by the sound of him hitting someone hard. Achiko looked over and saw that he had knocked the guy who could displace things, who was also holding the back of the exoskeleton she was wearing. Ah, that was going to be difficult to explain to Melissa. You okay, Achiko? Durandal asked as he rushed over to her. I'm fine, Achiko replied. The exoskeleton. Not so much. Well, at least you're able to take it off now, Durandal remarked. I think that's the Kleiner said, looking around. All the robots had been destroyed, and the villains were either knocked out or had a large number of wolves pinning them to the ground. Good, Durandal said. Now what? We should catch up with Izumi and Melissa, Achiko said before turning towards the elevator. The problem is how? We can't use the elevator, and climbing the tower will take too long. Well, we have to get up there somehow, Durandal said, looking up. Suddenly, the entire building shook. What was TT that? Kleiner asked, shuddering badly. Methinks someone is mad up there, Durandal remarked, still looking up. Suddenly, a green bolt smashed through the cycling, shot straight down, and smashed through the floor. Correction, me knows that Izumi is pissed off, Durandal said as he walked over to the hole and looked down it. Oh boy, she is indeed pissed. That goes down all the way to the 2nd floor. He said before looking up. Straight from the top floor too. She must be pissed. How did you know it was Izumi? Achiko asked. I saw her green hair, Durandal replied. Which was also blowing, by the way. I'm going to ask her about that later. As well as where she got that suit of armor she was wearing. What? Achiko said, looking confused. How could you see that? Even if it was Izumi, she was going too fast for me to even see. And I am an alpha-level AI who can perceive time at a slower pace than you can, Durandal replied. Ah, right, forgot about that, Achiko said, rubbing the back of her head. Maybe she wouldn't have forgotten that if there wasn't this constant thumping. And then, something happened. The thumping in her head stopped and an announcement came over the intercom saying that the island's security was now returning to safe mode. She could think clearly again. That wasn't all that happened. Hey, the power drain stopped. Someone must have restored the security systems, Durandal said. Looks like it, Achiko said. Suddenly, a blue bolt suddenly shot up from the hole in the floor, flew up, and shot through the hole in the cycling. And that was All Might heading up to the top floor, Durandal said. Probably to check up on David and Melissa. They're probably still up there. Achiko nodded before she looked down the hole, amazed by Izumi's power. Is that what she'll be like when she fully masters One for All? Neat. Meanwhile, down at the party venue, everyone felt the building shudder, with more than a few people making worried cries. What the hell was that? One of the villains asked. Don't know, another villain replied before he quickly got out his radio. You are, boss. What's going up there? The villain asked into the radio, waiting a good few seconds before speaking again. Boss, please respond. Boss? A green bolt suddenly shot through the skylight and smashed into the floor, sending anyone nearby who wasn't already on the floor flailing onto it. Thankfully, the impact zone itself was unoccupied, as most of the people had been moved away from the center of the room. The villains quickly turned towards where the bolt hit and aimed their guns at it. But what they ended up seeing shocked them. And they weren't the only ones. Wolfram lay on the floor, unconscious. All of his teeth had been punched out of his face and his uniform had been utterly destroyed, leaving him with nothing but rags. Standing over him was Izumi, green lightning arching over her insectoid-looking armor, her green hair glowing. Don't move! One of the villains said as he and the other pointed their rifles at her. But it was clear that some of them were shaking. Move and we'll dash. We'll shoot a hostage, he said as he pointed his rifle at the nearest hostage, which just so happened to be Himiko. Izumi glared towards the villain in question, the fool who decided to threaten one of her friends. Her green eyes flashed a sinister green. The villain shivered violently before collapsing onto the floor, a wet patch forming around his waist. Himiko quickly shuffled away from him to get away from the stain. She didn't want the man's piss on her dress. She may not like parties like this, but the dress was cute. Anyone else? Izumi asked, looking over the rest of the villains as their leader lay on the floor below her. The remaining villains promptly dropped their weapons and held their hands in the air. Ha! Looks like there are some villains out there who have brain cells, the second vestige remarked. You don't often see that. Izumi nodded before there was an announcement over the intercom, stating that the security systems were now in safe mode, and the wrappings that held the heroes loosened. Good, David was able to take back control of the system, Izumi thought with a smile. Young Izu dash. I mean, Yusako. Toshinori said as he rushed over to her, having just freed himself from his bindings. The other heroes quickly doing the same. Some went to detain the villains whilst others spread out throughout the building to apprehend the rest of the villains. What are you doing here? Here. Oh, All Might, Izumi jumped. Well, Achiko, Melissa, Durandal and I were late and didn't get here until just as the villains took the place over. So we decided to try and help out, she said nervously. Yusako. I know you and your friends wanted to help out, and, whilst I am amazed that you were able to defeat their leader, you were still students, Toshinori said. You shouldn't have gotten involved. I know, Izumi said with a frown. But I couldn't just sit back and not do anything. You wouldn't be my successor if you didn't. I am so proud of you, Toshinori thought with a smile. Unfortunately, he couldn't vocalize this due to there being so many pro-heroes around. He'll tell her how proud he is of her later. I know. And in time, you will become a great hero. But, whilst you did do well, right now you are still a student. There is still much for you to learn. Just don't let this get to your head. Not everyone can punch a villain like that from all the way up from the top floor. Yes, I did, Izumi said before she went pale and looked straight up, towards the long line of holes in the ceiling. Oh bugger, she muttered before she promptly fainted. Toshinori looked down at Izumi and sighed. He probably should have expected that from her the moment she realized she had just fallen 200 plus floors. Izumi! Momo, Nijire, Himiko, Su, Mei and Chiharu gasped as they rushed over to her, worried looks on their faces. Is she okay? Momo asked. I don't know, May replied as she examined the armor Izumi was wearing. This armor feels organic. This isn't like any kind of armor I've seen before. What on earth is this? Melissa meanwhile was sweating bullets. You would too if you were in her situation. Please go away, please go away. You are not supposed to see this. Why did Izumi just faint like that? Mother is so going to take away my AR room privileges. Melissa panicked as Izumi's friends tried to check on the girl. Not easy when you are currently being warned by the girl. Toshinori coughed. Now you lot, you might want to give her some space. I'm sure the island's medical services can look after her. Just keep an eye on her until they arrive. Of course, Momo said. All might, Blitz said as he rushed over. We've secured the floor and made sure everyone's safe. Great. Thank you, my friend. Toshinori said. You and the other heroes keep securing the building. I'll check the top floor. He said before he jumped up through the hole in the ceiling and kept flying up, passing by Achiko and Durandal on the way up to the top floor. Upon reaching the top floor, he quickly looked around. There were 2 more villains lying on the floor unconscious, as well as David's assistant, Samuel. There was the sound of keyboard pressing from deeper in. Quickly he rushed towards the sound, rushing down a passage towards the security room, and found David typing at the security terminal. Instantly Toshinori released his quirk and rushed over. You alright? I'm fine, Toshinori. Just bruised in places, David replied, rubbing his neck. What about you? Had to hold my hero form for longer than I expected to, Toshinori replied. Thankfully I didn't have to move much, so I could maintain it for longer. But, it's a good thing you were able to restore the island's security when you did. I don't think I could have maintained it for much longer. Thank your successor, she's the one who made this possible, David said. I see why you chose her. She's just like you. You can thank Melissa too. I'm slightly annoyed that she stole my security card, but they probably wouldn't have been able to get up here without it. So that's how they got up here, Toshinori said before looking around. So, where is Melissa? David smirked. Who do you think Izumi was wearing? A surprised look formed on Toshinori's face. That armor was Melissa. How? When did she learn to do that? Don't know. Must have been something she's been working on in private, David said. I was rather surprised by that. Didn't think she could do that. Learn something new every day, Toshinori said before he looked at the screen before them. How's the situation? These guys are everywhere. They have men at the other 4 security terminals, David replied. No idea how they found out about them all. The locations for the security terminals aren't publicly known, and Samuel only knew of 1 inch. Samuel was working with them? Toshinori gasped. David nodded somberly. Yes, he was, and I fear he wasn't the only one. He brought them in because he was annoyed that something we were working on, a device that could safely enhance a person's quirk, was taken away from us. He wanted to be rewarded for all the work he put into it and brought in a bunch of villains to do it. Quite the large group, by the looks of it. There's heavy fighting at the other terminals. Security forces are en route, but it'll be a while before they can suppress them. It's going to be a long night, he said with a frown. The security cameras are down in some places. My doing really. Can't let anyone find out about you, or Melissa. Should we tell her, your successor, that is? I'm not sure she's ready to know that, David, Toshinori replied. It's a big secret, very big, bigger than one for all big. She's already got enough on her plate as it is. Let's not give her more to worry about. You sure about that, Toshinori? David asked. She's going to find out about it sooner or later. I know that, David, Toshinori replied. But she's not ready for it. Not yet. Well, I hope she is, David said, turning towards a security feed showing the medical ward, which had Izumi, who was still wearing Melissa, with Durandal and Achiko nearby. I fear we won't have a choice in the matter. Meanwhile, in one of the island's residential districts, Twice and Tesla were bored. The island being in complete lockdown meant that they couldn't do much. With the Wi-Fi and internet down, they couldn't do anything, so they were just sitting around, doing nothing, whilst Hilala was currently having a shower. Bored, Twice said, laying back on the sofa whilst kicking his feet in the air. Bored. At least you agree on something, Tesla remarked. He had no idea what was going on or why the entire island was on lockdown, but it sucked. They were stuck in their room, unable to leave or contact anyone from Avalon. They were fucking stuck. There was suddenly a loud scream, followed by the sound of someone getting smashed through a door. The two men quickly got up and rushed over towards the noise, and found a man crumpled against the wall, the door to the bathroom in bits around him. Ow, the man groaned. He had long white hair and wore what looked like a military uniform, with odd-looking goggles over his eyes. Who the hell are you? Tesla asked. The hacker, an ex-Avalon programmer, Hilala replied with a scowl as she stomped out of the bathroom, a white towel covering her. What the hell are you doing here? The hacker groaned before raising an arm. My apologies. Didn't realize the closest member of Avalon was in the shower. You worked for Avalon, Tesla said, sounding surprised. What the hell are you doing here? Knocking off hacking into the island security systems off my bucket list, the man said as he got back up. You hacked Island, Hilala said, looking slightly annoyed. Please tell us that you are not responsible for the island being in lockdown? Sadly yes, the hacker said. Wait, we're still on Island? Yes, Hilala said with a nod. Fuck, the hacker cursed. I was hoping that I would be transported away from this island. Now how the fuck am I going to get off? How did you even get here in the first place? Tesla asked. This island's security is top-notch. They should have recognized you the moment you stepped on the island. Joined up with a bunch of ex-Raft guys who apparently wanted to drop the export, the hacker replied. They were trying to rob the island of some quirk amplifier and had insider help too. Not really worth my time, but it allowed me to kick something off my bucket list. And maybe download everything on their servers, because why not? Wait, you hacked the island servers, Twice said. Cheat. We were going to do that. Oh thank fuck, we don't need to attend that boring party later, Hilala said with a relieved sigh. We can fucking enjoy ourselves now. When this lockdown ends we're going to the nearest strip club and enjoying ourselves. There aren't any strip clubs on the island, Tesla interjected. There isn't even a red light district. A grumpy look formed on Hilala's face. We fucking hate this place. No red light district. Why even live here? Who in their right mind doesn't put a red light district inside a major city like this? Island apparently, the hacker said. It's a place dedicated to quirk science and support equipment. I think they didn't include a red light district so that the scientists weren't distracted. Well fuck them. Not everyone here is a scientist, some people just want to have a little fun, Hilala remarked. No wonder so many people defected. Unless you're a scientist, this place is boring. I don't think that's the reason, Tesla said. Well, it's not the reason why my dad defected. Well, now that we're all here, how do we get off? The hacker asked. Because I doubt I will be able to get off unnoticed. Don't worry, we can get you off, Hilala said with a smirk. It's the least we can do for saving us from the most boring party in the universe. Thanks, much appreciated, the hacker said. It was then that the island went out of lockdown. Finally. Twice said happily the TV is back. Now we can watch porn. You are, I already checked. There are sadly no porn channels available, Tesla said. Fuck this fucking island and everyone who fucking lives on it. Hilala growled. We swear this island is run by boring old men who never got laid. The other nodded. It really felt like it at times. The sooner they got off this island, the better. Meanwhile, back at the Island Tower, Izumi was just starting to wake back up after fainting. "URG. What happened?" Izumi asked as she sat up on the bed. "You fainted," Achiko replied. Izumi looked to the side and saw Achiko sitting on the bed next to her, with Durandal sitting on the floor. "Oh, hey guys. Guess I frightened myself back there." "You almost gave me a heart attack," Achiko said with a frown. "What even happened?" "Well, I beat the villains up," Izumi replied nervously. "Kind of disappointing, really. The guy in charge went down in 2 hits. Admittedly, one of those hits was me punching him through the entire building." "That's one for all for you," the whispery voice said. "It's gotten so powerful that very few people can withstand a hit at full power. I'm just surprised you didn't break yourself this time. That armor you were wearing is something else." "I think the shock from finding out that I fell from the top floor got the better of me," Izumi continued, ignoring the voice of the vestige. "I think David's shield restored the security systems." Well, at least we won," Achiko said with a sigh. "And I'm glad you're alright. Just don't do that again, okay?" "Don't worry, I won't," Izumi said with a smile. "I'm glad you're okay as well, Achiko. Say, what happened to the exoskeleton you were wearing?" "It was destroyed," Achiko reapplied. "One of the villains ripped it from my back, destroying it," Achiko said. "At least I was able to finally take it off." "At the cost of destroying it." Izumi smiled, glad that her girlfriend was alright. "Izumi, one small question," Durandal said. "What the fuck are you wearing? I mean, what in the hell is that armor?" "It's not like any armor I've ever seen before. The material it's made from is not only organic, but it's breathing. Armor should not breathe. It is also thinking, Achiko added. "Okay, all I get is what sounds like static from it, but it's definitely thinking." "That's because said armor is us," Melissa said, surprising the 3 of them. Yes, Izumi had forgotten that she was somehow wearing Melissa. Melissa." Achiko gasped. "Yep, that's us," Melissa spoke, her voice somehow coming from the armor Izumi was wearing. "Apologies about the spook, but, well, shit happened and someone decided to shoot us. Things spiraled out of control, and, well, here we are." "You are right," Izumi said nervously. "Melissa, why are you a suit of armor? I've never worn a girl before." And that was a sentence she never thought she'd say. "Aren't you supposed to be quirkless?" Achiko asked. "And we are," Melissa replied. "This ability, well dash. Isn't a quirk," Izumi finished. "Looks like Achiko and Eri's telepathic abilities aren't the only non-quirk abilities out there." "Yes," Melissa replied. "It's not an easy thing to explain. Hold one, let us just take on a more comfortable form." The door to the medical room opened, and a robot marched in carrying some clothing. The robot looked a bit like one of those silent centurions from Battlestar Galactica, but with a more feminine body. There was also a slight insectoid feel to it. The robot walked over to a nearby bed and deposited the clothing onto it. "Izumi, word of warning. This may feel creepy," Melissa said before the armor Izumi was wearing crawled off of her body. Izumi shivered as she felt billions of tiny things crawl over her body as Melissa crawled off of her, moved over to the other bed and engulfed the clothing that had been put onto it. The mass of something soon took on the shape of a person, moving the clothing so that it was covering it. Then, Melissa's form quickly formed in place of the mass, hair undone. "Well, that's not something we do often," Melissa remarked as she checked herself out. "At least we didn't put anything on backwards this time." "That was so cool," Izumi said with stars in her eyes, ignoring the itchy feeling she got from the feeling of billions of tiny things crawling all over her. "Well, you're not a robot, that's for sure," Durandal said, tilting his head. "Those were clearly bugs of some sort." "You could tell what those are?" Achiko gasped. Durandal nodded. "Yep. Had to zoom in a lot, but yes, I could see them. And that is a shit ton of bugs that you are made out of. Yes, we are composed of insects, Melissa cursed, lowering her head. It's a very long story. But, why say you were quirkless? Achiko asked. You could easily have passed that off as a quirk? Because how the hell are we supposed to explain this? Melissa asked, pointing to herself. I'd have to classify this as a mutation quirk due to my body being composed of billions upon billions of microscopic bugs. It's going to bring up so many questions as we were clearly born not like this. Any explanation we could come up with would be called bullshit. So, quirkless it was. It was safer this way. My dad didn't want any more attention on us. Just coming back from being brain dead was stretching the miracle part. Coming back as a massive swarm of insects would have been full-on bullshit. Izumi nodded. Unlike emitter and transformation quirks, those with mutation quirks have their quirk factors show up at birth, they just don't fully express themselves till much later. If she had revealed this ability as a quirk, then a lot of people would have called bullshit on that because someone could easily tell that she was not born as a massive swarm of bugs. Still, how did she become this? So, you weren't born like that, Izumi stated. That much I can tell. Can't really kill the brain of a massive swarm of insects. Which means that the miracle revival that brought you back is this, right? Melissa nodded. Yes, this is how we were brought back. It's a long story, and we're going to need our dad around to help explain it. Maybe Uncle might as well. He was there when I was revived and helped collaborate my dad's story. We might need them here as well to fill in some gaps. You can explain it in the morning. If you want to, that is, Izumi said. I won't force you to explain anything. If you want to keep this a secret you can, I won't force you. But, if you want to tell us, please, do it in the morning. Are you sure about this, Izumi? Durandal asked. This might be important. Positive, Izumi replied. This secret, whatever it is. David and All Might went to great lengths to keep it. And I won't force them to divulge this. By the sounds of things, this is bigger than One for All. So, I won't force anyone to divulge this to any of us. Plus, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and just want to snuggle up to my girlfriend. I just don't want to deal with this tonight. Don't worry, we'll wait till morning then, Melissa said. But, one small question. What's One for All? Izumi and Achiko gulped. Fuck. Durandal shook his head. Well, tomorrow looks like it's going to be interesting. Toshinori walked into the hospital room, a small frown on his face. He didn't like doing this, but this was his friend he was talking about here. He was worried about him. Inside the room, working at one of many consoles, was his old sidekick and old friend, David Shield. David was a tall man with aqua eyes and light brown hair that was short and messy, as well as a short goatee on his chin. There was one other in the room. A young, 3-year-old girl, lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to almost every machine in the room. This child was Melissa Shield, David's daughter. And sadly, she was brain dead. The day Melissa was born was the happiest day of David's life. But, sadly, the very next day, it was all taken away from him. There was a violent villain attack on the hospital David's wife was staying at. The attack took not only her life, but Melissa was caught up in it as well, resulting in her suffering from brain death. No more than a day old, and her entire future was taken from her, before she even had a chance to live it. David broke that day. The loss of his wife, and the condition his daughter was in, he just shut down. For a few weeks, he just didn't respond to anything. He still moved around, ate and slept, but he didn't do anything. It took weeks before he started talking to others, but the overall recovery was still ongoing. Ever since that day, David had been working hard to try and find a way to revive Melissa. To little to no success. It hurt him to see his friend like this, so broken and focused on an impossible task. He just wanted to help him. David, Toshinori said as he walked up behind his friend. Ha, David murmured as he looked up and turned towards him. "Oh, hi Toshinori. Thought you'd be asleep by now?" "David, it's 6 in the morning," Toshinori said with a frown. "It is?" David said with a frown before he looked at his watch. He sighed. "Another accidental all-nighter. You need to stop doing this." "It's not good for you," Toshinori said, a worried look on his face. I know, David said before he turned towards the young girl that was Dash. "That should be his daughter." "I'm close, I'm sure of it this time." "You've been saying that for the past 2 years, Toshinori said. "But this time I mean it," David said. "I know I'm close this time." "You've said that before too," Toshinori said with a frown. "Look, I know you want to revive your daughter, allow her to witness all the wonders of the world. I want her to as well. But, as much as I do not wish to say this, it might be time to let her go. The brain is the most complicated part of the human body. And even now we don't fully understand it. We haven't even been able to find someone with a quirk that can help Dash." "No!" David shouted, slamming a fist onto the table. "I will not give up. Melissa is all I have left. There has to be a way to bring her back. To revive her. I just have to find it." Toshinori took a step back from David, a surprised look on his face. He'd never seen his friend react like this before. David frowned. "I'm sorry, Toshinori. I didn't mean to shout." "It's all right," Toshinori said. "You're probably just tired." David rubbed his eyes. "Yeah, you're probably right. I've been working too much as of late. I should get some sleep." Toshinori put an arm around his friend and helped escort him out of the room. It pained him to say that, but he sadly knew a lost cause when he saw one. There had never been a case of someone who's gone through brain death being successfully revived. Brain death was sadly permanent. Toshinori, David said as they walked. "Just a few more weeks. Please. I'm close to finding a way to revive her, I'm sure of it." "Don't worry, David," Toshinori said. "I won't force you to take her off life support. Just promise me that you'll take better care of your health from now on." David nodded. "Thanks, Toshinori Dash," he said before they were suddenly engulfed by some kind of green light. "What the?" He gasped before there was a flash, and their surroundings changed. 1 minute they were in a medical room housing David's daughter, the next, they were in an odd-looking room that reminded him of the transporter bays from Star Trek, but the room was different. The walls were clearly made from metal, but they had a green tint as well as an insectoid feel to them. It felt alien. "Toshinori, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," David remarked as he looked around. Yes, he did just reference the Wizard of Oz there. Who wouldn't in this situation? Toshinori flexed his muscles. "Stand back, David. I'll get us out of here." "Toshinori, wait," David said. "Let's figure out where we are first, before we start punching things, okay? Are you sure that's a wise thing to do?" Toshinori asked as he noticed his friend go into analysis mode. "We could have been kidnapped?" "I know," David said, looking around. "But, let's figure out where we are and why we're here first, before we try to escape. We've been brought here for some reasons. Let's find out why that is first, okay? If they point guns at us, then punch them. But until then, let's try and be civil about this." Toshinori reluctantly nodded. He didn't like the idea of just sitting around after getting kidnapped like this, but David was right, they had no idea why they had been brought here. So, the smart thing would be to hold back and wait and see what will happen. If they were hostile, then he could deal with them. But, if they were peaceful, then he and David could deal with it peacefully. Being a hero didn't mean punching all of your problems in the face. Diplomacy was an important part of the job as well. Suddenly a hexagonal door opened on the opposite side of the room, and an insectoid-like robot crawled in. It looked something like a mix between a praying mantis and a spider. The mistress apologies for bringing you here without prior contact or warning, the robot said with a bow. Its voice, whilst mechanical, had a clear feminine tone to it. If you would kindly follow us, the mistress wishes to speak to you. David nodded. Of course. Lead the way. David, are you sure about this? Toshinori asked, a slightly worried look on his face. As I said, Toshinori, we might as well figure out why we were brought here first before we try to fight our way out, David said before he followed the robot out. Toshinori reluctantly followed. They exited the room into a hexagonal corridor. They followed the robot down the corridor, which they only just noticed was curved upwards. Okay, I'm starting to see what you meant by we're not in Kansas anymore, Toshinori remarked looking around. Where do you think we are? I'm not completely sure yet, but I think we're no longer on Earth, David said, sounding excited. I think we're on a starship. The floor is curving upwards, so we're probably inside a massive centrifuge. The people who built this ship probably don't have the means to generate artificial gravity. If they could, the corridor would be straight or flat, not curved upwards. So, aliens then. We've been kidnapped by aliens, Toshinori said, sounding oddly calm about the situation. But then again, his quirk was a 200-year-old quirk that could be passed from person to person and came with its own nemesis. Guess that throws punching our way out of this. Neither of us can breathe in space. So, any idea what kind of aliens we're dealing with? He asked as he discreetly marked "Get Kidnapped by Aliens" off on his one-for-all shenanigans bingo card. Well, we're definitely dealing with some sort of insectoid species, David replied, still looking around. The hexagonal corridor and doors, a very common shape in stuff like beehives or wasp nests. There are no straight edges either, they're all curved. Just like hexagons found in nature. Clearly the thinking of an insect. Plus our host said that their mistress wishes to speak to us. Clearly, we're dealing with a matriarchal society, as insects tend to be. A single queen commanding hundreds of drones. Alien bugs. This'll be interesting. If you say so, Toshinori said. Let's hope these aliens come in peace. But, why contact us and not someone else, like a world leader? Don't know, David said before the robot stopped and turned towards them. But I think we're about to find out. In here, please, the robot said, gesturing to a now open door. The mistress will see you now. David and Toshinori shared a quick glance before they entered the room. And were shocked by who they saw. Greetings, humans, a woman who could be best described as She-Hulk mixed in with an Orion from Star Trek, said as she, and three others like her bowed completely in sync. It was almost creepy how the four of them were able to bow in exact sync. Well. That's not the kind of insect I was expecting, David remarked. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 63. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.